and welcome to Your Right on Trust TV, the program that is dedicated to providing you with legal knowledge to protect your rights. I'm Hawa Usman, your host, and today we'll be talking about a relationship that affects nearly everyone, the relationship between banks and their customers. From unauthorized deductions to failed transfers and ATM disputes, many Nigerians struggle with understanding their rights in the banking system. But did you know that your relationship with your bank is governed by law, and that you have enforceable rights as a consumer of financial services? To help us understand these rights and the legal remedies available, I am joined by Barrister Mutiu Akinsanya, a lawyer, a banking law expert, and a consumer rights advocate. Welcome to the program, Barrister Mutiu.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
So before we delve into the discussion today, let's hear what some Nigerians are saying about this issue.
It's very paramount for you to actually take your time to read terms and conditions. But I don't think the awareness is good enough. So I think we need to work on the awareness for the members of the public to actually know the implication of what they are going into, maybe signing agreement or some other things.
I actually did a transaction for somebody, and the person called me later on, like after 2 weeks, like, you have not gotten the alert. I was like, okay, fine. It doesn't have any physical bank here in Abuja, so I think they have in Lagos. So I was like, okay, let me just, talk to them online. So that was where the people got the access to all and they wiped up all my money. So that's just the only experience I had. But for my other banks, it have been nice and good.
Being the NOK is never a yardstick for me to assess my mother's financial status. That I must go through. I'm going to Glow office now. You understand, ba? To do some changes from there. Bring it back to the bank to have something as an evidence instead of my name being in the bank as the next of kin. They won't allow me to access the money. They say I must go there, change the Glow number, do this, do that, and all sorts. So it has not been easy. Bank is not an institution again. Let me just say, I have nothing good to write home about them.
Welcome back. So, Barrister, I like to start from the basics. Let's understand what is the relationship between a banker and a customer of the bank.
Okay, so there can be several relationships between a banker and their customers, and it can come in several phases. You have a situation where you have a creditor and a debtor relationship. You can also have a debtor-creditor relationship. You can have a bailor-bailee relationship. And you can also have a principal and then an agency relationship. But the most popular relationship that we have or customers have with the banks are situations where these customers are depositors, operating either a savings account or a current account or whatever type of accounts that are created by those banks. And so under such kind of relationship, there are certain duties and obligations on both the customer and the banks. But one that stands out is that where an individual or an entity is a customer of a bank, keeping his money in those accounts, the bank has a duty to always honor the payment for those monies. You also have situations where individuals also take loans from banks, and those loans also have several conditions that are attached to them. So in that kind of relationship, you also have different rules or different laws that also governs that kind of relationship. There are also relationships where individuals also decide to keep their valuables with the bank. There are people who have gold, jewelries, and they don't want to keep it at home. They prefer to keep it in the bank. Or very valuable land documents or whatever documents. And so when they also approach banks to also keep those kind of very valuable documents or commodities, there's also a different kind of relationship that is created.
That is being created.
Yes. You also have a lot of big entities across the world or within the country, big companies doing businesses every day, who also decide to also appoint banks to also help them collect monies on their behalf.
Okay.
When you also have that kind of relationship, there are also different conditions that also govern that kind of relationship. But like I said, the most important relationship that we come across on a day-to-day basis is the relationship of depositors.
Yes, and that takes me to my next question.
Yes.
That if, as an individual, I open an account with a bank,
Yes.
what right do I have over the bank, for instance?
Okay, so there are several rights that an individual has when he or she operates an account with a bank. But let me lay this background so we can understand the context of those rights. When I walk into a bank and I ask the bank to open an account for me, I'm not dealing with the bank alone. There are also several intermediaries that come in between me and the bank. And this came about as a result of the electronic banking that we operate today, which is also largely regulated by the Central Bank of Nigeria. About 20, 30 years ago, when we were still doing manual banking, very little intermediaries come between an individual or a depositor and the bank. But today, there are several intermediaries that comes between us and the bank that we may not necessarily see when we enter into a banking relationship. But what that brings up is a lot of legal issues that can always come up. But what becomes important is that the entity we're seeing is the bank. Yes. And the bank has a duty to always disclose who those intermediaries are whenever we seek to enter into any relationship. I'll give you an example. If you open an account and you decide to say, oh, you want to get an ATM card, the issuer of that ATM card is not the bank.
It's not really the bank.
It's not really the bank. It may be MasterCard, it may be Verve, and some other companies across the world or within Nigeria who are the card issuers.
So does that create a tripartite relationship between the bank, the individual, and then the company who is acting in the in the circumstance?
Exactly. So you can have tripartite relationship. You can even have relationships even involving more than 3, 4, and 5 entities. And that's why it's very important that as individuals or as entities, when we walk into a bank to open those accounts we open or to begin a relationship, which is contractual, we must ensure that we always read the terms and conditions.
But in most cases, when you see the forms, these terms and conditions are so written in very small alphabet, and then it's usually mostly cumbersome.
Yes.
So in that circumstance, what's a customer supposed to do? Take the form, take 3, 4, 5 days, read out those terms and conditions before coming back, or what is the kind of situation that the customer finds themselves?
That's exactly what the customer should do. So when you pick up a form to open an account, there is no requirement that you must do it immediately. Yes, you can take your time, go through it, and then see whether the terms are agreeable to you or not. Because you're also required to also sign and to also put your name and also date those documents to show that they're binding on you as you begin that relationship. But beyond all of those conditions that may be contained, there are certain obligations that banks have towards their customers. And like I said, in a depositor-banker relationship, the bank always has a duty to always honor requests for funds whenever an individual makes those requests. So if I have a bank account, my monies are contained therein. If I walk into a financial institution or a bank and request that my money be paid, that institution has a duty to honor it.
The request.
Yes, even if I ask that payment be made in favor of a third party, the bank has a duty to ensure that payment is made.
Okay, but you said it's a contractual relationship.
It is.
Which means that we are supposed to ordinarily sit down and discuss the terms of that contract.
Yeah.
But, I mean, bank forms are already in their default mode. So if I come to one bank, I pick a form, I read through the terms and conditions, I'm not satisfied, can I also make my input? Or I leave that one, I go to another bank, pick up a form, I also see terms and conditions that I'm really not comfortable with. What options do I have? Can I approach the bank and ask, I want to discuss the terms of this form?
Okay, that's why we must understand that the banking world is very competitive. And that's why you have several banks out there that are licensed by the central bank. And even several banks with different kind of products. For instance, you have banks that are non-interest banks, you have banks that are commercial banks, you have banks that are merchant banks, and so on and so forth. You even have microfinance bank. All of these are banks or financial institutions that are licensed by the central bank to carry out banking transactions. So at every point in time, when it comes to transacting with the bank, you must choose the one that meets your preference. So if you see Bank A, for instance, you will find that maybe some of the terms and conditions may not be for people like you. So you may have to look at Bank B, Bank C, or Bank D. But what becomes very important is that all of those terms and conditions can also be negotiated.
Okay.
And it depends on also what you're bringing to the bank. And no bank will tell you that this is what it must be, and we're not ready to discuss with you. Particularly for people who have very large funding, and the bank knows, because most banks, what they want is to have accounts that will be able to hold a large number of funds. So if you have enough money or a very thriving business and that you're bringing to the bank, or you want to open that account with the bank, it also puts you in a good pedestal to be able to discuss those terms and conditions with the bank. So it's possible for a bank to have condition A for customer A.
Certain category of customer.
Yes.
And then condition B for another certain category of customer.
That's it. And so it's not that it is cast in stone. When you're not comfortable with certain conditions after reading them or certain terms, you can simply bring it up and say, oh, I've read those clauses, I've read those terms and conditions, I'm not satisfied with A, B, or C. Is there a way the bank can waive them for me, or can they be removed from this contract so that I can sign them? So it can be negotiated.
So one of the most common complaints you hear from customers involves unauthorized deductions or failed transactions. What recourse does the law provide in such circumstance?
Okay, so when you have unauthorized transactions, what it means is that somebody must have tampered with the account of a customer. So if a customer notices that his account has been debited or it's been tampered with in any way, what that customer is expected to do is to report to the bank immediately. Or even when charges are made on the account illegally. Because again, at the point of commencing a banking relationship with your bank should also be able to tell you what will be the charges. Or even if you have commenced the banking relationship and there's any changes, maybe due to the regulations from the regulators, maybe like the central bank or NDIC, the bank also has a duty to also inform you. I'll give an example. Like a few years ago, we had the Stamp Duties Act that was passed. That requires deduction of 50 naira stamp duties from account of individuals, depending on every transaction. I think every transaction beyond 10,000 or thereabouts. That was an instruction from the regulator. And of course, all of the banks were required to also communicate, to comply, and to also communicate it to their various customers. So that was coming from a regulator. And so an individual cannot wake up and say it's an unauthorized deduction or an unauthorized transaction on their accounts. But of course, when the bank needs to make certain deductions, maybe for services they render, the bank will have to inform their customers when there are changes. And of course, also at the commencement of the banking relationship, the bank also needs to let their customers to know that A, B, C apply as charges for our services. But where the bank decides to make those deductions without any authorization from the regulators or make those deductions without ensuring that it goes in tandem with whatever contract they have entered to, then the customer has a right for redress, has a right to complain. And so under the banking regulations, whatever complaint the customer has to do must be done in writing. Or you can also go to the customer desk.
Keep that thought. We'll be back shortly. You're still watching Your Right on Trust TV. And when we will be back, this discussion continues. Welcome back. Barrister, you were talking about writing.
Yes.
So if a customer complains to a bank
Yes.
and the bank does not take action,
Yes.
urgently,
Yeah.
what is the customer supposed to do? What are the other avenues that are available for the customer to seek redress?
Okay, so it's important to know that the Central Bank of Nigeria, in the case of Nigeria, usually have regulations that governs or regulate customers' complaints. And the Consumer Protection Regulation of the CBN requires that where a particular customer is not happy with any service he or she receives from the bank, he or she should complain to that bank first. And such complaint usually can be by email, can be by walking into the bank to fill the requisite forms. Because again, every bank out there is required to have a customer desk or a consumer complaint desk where customers can always walk to and then make their complaints. And depending on the bank, right, banks also have their internal regulations for dealing with customers' complaints. And usually maybe between 2 and 5 days, they are required to be able to deal with that complaint and give the customer a feedback or a response.
Okay.
Where the customer does not get a feedback or a response, or where the response he or she gets from the bank is not satisfactory, there is a second step to it, and that is writing to the Consumer Protection Department of the Central Bank of Nigeria. That will also have to look at it and see if that individual has a case with the bank. And where there is need for a redress, of course, the Consumer Protection Department of the Central Bank will order the bank to make the necessary redress. Where it's an unauthorized transaction, they may ask that the money be refunded to the customer. Or whatever it is, they will ask that a redress be carried out in favor of the customer. But where even the Consumer Protection Department of the CBN is not also forthcoming, or where they may have given their decision and that customer is not satisfied, the customer can still go to court to still seek for the enforcement of whatever right he or she thinks has been breached by the bank.
So is it also legal, and this has become quite frequent these days, for banks to freeze the account of individuals, organizations, without a court order? Or where there is a court order, is the customer supposed to be notified that their account will be freezed? Okay,
so the banks have rights to freeze accounts even before obtaining court order, but depending on the circumstance. If a bank, for instance, suspects that there is a fraudulent transaction, looking at the bank account, knowing the history of that account, if they suspect that there may have been a fraudulent transaction, of course they can freeze such accounts. If they also suspect that such account may be used for money laundering, maybe from the face of it, or because they have received a complaint, maybe from a sister bank or from an individual, they may also temporarily also freeze such accounts. Again, if they also feel that there may be financing of certain criminal actions, particularly terrorism, they may also temporarily freeze those accounts. But in any of these instances where these accounts are frozen, they also have a duty to quickly get to court and get an order to ensure that what they have done is within the legal spectrum.
Parameters.
Yes. So there are instances where banks can do so, but of course they should immediately also ensure that they also seek for an order of court. And on the second question, yes, where the bank decides to freeze an account or to put PND on an account, the customer must be notified. And particularly where the customer was not heard at the point of getting an order to freeze such accounts. Security agents, for instance, will usually use ex parte orders to get orders of court to freeze an account. And that means that the individual who owns the account may have not been put on notice. So when the bank gets such order, they also have a duty to also inform the customer so as not to deny the customer the right to fair hearing.
Yeah.
And so that the customer can also take whatever step he or she needs to take to perhaps also approach the court or to approach the security agents to also
I know the reason why their
Why-
account has been ordered to be
frozen. Yes, yes.
And then, well, it's also takes me to the next question, whether I can sue a bank for a negligent act or a breach.
Yeah, so whenever a customer feels that there's a breach to the contract between him or her and the bank, or whenever he feels that there's something wrong, yes, the customer can only complain to the bank. I said that earlier on. And that is what the banking CBN regulation requires. In fact, you can't even go to the central bank to report a bank. You must ensure that you utilize the internal mechanism of that bank to seek redress. And that's why I also say when you do all of this, it's important that it is in writing, because that's the only evidence you can show that you have made that complaint. So if there's a negligence in respect of your bank account, or you feel there's something wrong with your bank account, or something wrong with your property that you may have even kept in the bank, whether documents or anything, of course you have the right to complain to the bank. Then the next step to the CBN.
Okay, this last question.
Yes.
What are those common mistakes that customers make? Because this is important. What are the common mistakes that customers make that is akin to the waiving of their rights?
Okay.
And then what is the position of giving a post-dated check?
Okay. Yes. Okay, so some of those basic mistakes that customers make is divulging certain confidential information that they should have regarding their accounts. And I'll give you an example. In this age and time of electronic banking transactions, a lot of us use our PINs either on the ATM machine or even on our applications on our phones. And a lot of us are not secretive about those passwords.
Safeguarding the passwords.
Safeguarding those passwords. So at times when there are compromises, it's usually perhaps by very close family members or friends who may have in one way or the other gotten hold of those passwords. And they can have access to our accounts, they can use it to make payments, they can use it to even withdraw monies. So I think these are some of the negligent acts that certain customers are very negligent about. And when those things happen, they run to their banks and say, oh, money is missing from my account, or my ATM card or my account has been used to make certain payments. So in that situation, of course, you can't hold the bank liable. And that's why it's important that consumers or customers of bank must also ensure that they keep those things very confidential.
Very confidential.
And even when it comes to even using those confidential message passwords on sites, you must also ensure that those sites are also protected.
Yeah.
Because there is what we call identity theft. There are a lot of websites out there that are not authorized to carry out certain transactions, but they're simply
Thank
created.
you very much, Barrister, for sharing such an invaluable insight. This is the much that we can take.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure.
You're welcome. As we have learned today, banking is not just a financial relationship, it's a legal one. And every Nigerian has the right to fair treatment, accountability, and protection in that relationship. Until next time, I am Hawa Usman, and this is Your Right on Trust TV. Stay informed and stay empowered.